Hi everybody, welcome to Real Product Strategy, the show where we take your favorite fictitious products from across our favorite TV shows, break down the products, understand them a little bit more, understand their competitive positioning in their market, and then craft them a long-term strategy for product growth. I'm your host, product manager, and business strategy professional, Tom Prime. Let's see what's on our airwaves today. So, today we're going to talk about Aviato from HBO's Silicon Valley, which happens to be one of my very favorite shows. So what excites me about this episode in particular is before I got into product management after earning my MBA from Holt International Business School, I was a software engineer for around 6.5 years, primarily with Fortune 500 companies, but a couple of mid-sized and a couple of small companies as well. And so I have a unique understanding of what it takes to bring a product like Aviato to market and how to grow the product, the ins and outs, or the potential ins and outs of the products, how it's broken down from a technical side, how that translates to a really strong product that can help those end customers out. So going off of that, this episode might be a little bit different today because this is the kind of thing that's right in my wheelhouse. What we're going to do is we're going to understand first our general jobs to be done from Aviato, and then what we're going to do is we're going to break down odds are how it was built technically, and how from there its history and how the current owner of those companies can grow that Aviato into something much greater than they probably originally intended. So Aviato is a software that aggregates a bunch of different data from social media sites, and it emphasizes, and its purpose is to understand whenever Frontier Airlines is mentioned, and then organizes that into region and airport, and then which airports are hubs and which aren't hubs. And it was developed by serial entrepreneur Erlich Bachman in the show. And so Erlich, as we can see right here, is played by TJ Miller, a very eclectic, out there character, disorganized, always seems to be a little bit disheveled, but he created this product, sold it to Frontier Airlines for a low 7 figures according to the lore of the show. Let's think about Aviato at its core. What problems are they trying to understand and solve here? And this is where jobs to be done takes place, right? And this is where it's really important. So a product like Aviato, and let's think about it. Why would you want to aggregate social media feeds to focus on Frontier Airlines and then take that data and analyze where it's originating from? And so through thinking about this issue, I came up with one pretty solid answer. And it is, as an airline, I want to know how my passengers truly feel about their flying experience. A lot of times when we fly, we're usually relatively content, right? And the amount of times when we reach out to a customer service lines, it's usually to complain, right? So airlines aren't getting the true full picture from their just complaint line, right? They're not getting that deeper understanding that they need in order to understand what's working, what's not working, and how to make their overall flying experience better. So a product like Aviato, what it would do essentially is, a lot of times when we're flying, we're going to social media. Frontier in my area flies out of Pi, which is actually the airport code for St. Pete International Airport. So if you're flying from Pi to, let's say, Houston, right? A hypothetical flight. We would want to know if someone's having a good time on their flight, if they're having a bad time, truly understand their experience, maybe get a little more insight to what they're doing. Are they sharing photos? Are they sharing just their overall feelings? Are they complaining about the crying baby in front of them? What are they doing, right? And this would be a fantastic way to do so. So understanding that, right, why would Frontier pay several $1 million for a tool that aggregates social media feeds, right? And we'll get into that later. And I think it actually, if it was real, if done right, it could make Frontier have a significantly exciting growth opportunity here. And business revolutionizing growth from this purchase of Aviato. So understanding the purpose of this, right? Now let's break down the tool, the Aviato itself, what it's doing, how is it going to do that from the journey, and the technologies are most likely required to do so. So when we're trying to collect data from social media feeds, right, there's usually one of two ways you're typically going to do it, and especially from when the time of this show aired, which was 2014, if I'm not mistaken. You can either use the API calls to social media sites, which are the most common way large scale organizations would do so, mainly because it's API calls it's a much more stable process. Granted, you're going to pay a little bit more money, but it's stable, it's consistent, and there's a stability there, and you're not going to get bad data, and you can usually get a lot cleaner data just through an API call. Or the way I'm assuming Ehrlich is doing it here, and that's by web scraping. So web scraping is essentially, it's a program, it's a series of commands that what it does is it takes a web page at its core and what's on the surface, and as it sounds, it just scrapes the data, right? So you're pulling up facebook.com and I'm scraping the data. I am pulling everything that is appearing on that given page, whether they're ads, whether they are random AI generated content, whether it is posts from my Aunt Beth about her latest batch of cookies. I'm getting all of that, right? So that's one of two ways you can do it. Odds are, so if you're running this program locally on your local computer, web scraping is free. It's just really computing intensive. So odds are that's how Ehrlich is getting his data. He's just scraping. He's scraping Twitter. He's scraping Facebook. He's scraping Instagram. He's just grabbing all this data and then obviously handling it. So when you get all this data, the next question is, how do you do it? You don't care about, again, my Aunt Beth's favorite cookies. You don't care about that. You care about data that's specific to Frontier Airlines. So what you want to do here is you need to process and filter this in a large framework. So we're going to look at, there's a couple of big data processing frameworks that most likely Ehrlich would have used, but there's one that's clearly more likely he was using. So the first option would have been Spark. And in the modern context, ideally you use Spark with either Python or Scala to basically filter out the good data, get rid of the bad data, because it's again, you're pulling probably terabytes of data here all of the time. So again, Spark was created in 2012, and seeing that Ehrlich was didn't have Aviato, as they didn't own Aviato anymore, but simply had sold it off, and that episode was the pilot episode was in 2014, and then this technology was created in 2012. Odds are he didn't use that, right? Especially early on in the process. Early adoption of technology, it takes a little bit of hurdle, so adopting it right out of the gate, I don't see it happening, or it's not as realistic. However, there's a similar framework, a little less performative, doesn't work as well, but it does the same job, it's effective, and that's Hadoop. Hadoop was created as an internal project out of Yahoo in 2006. So based on the timeline of this show, he's using Hadoop, probably with Python in the back end, as the language to process a lot of this data. We have our web scraping ingestion platform, which is very computing intensive. We have our Hadoop processing, which also, because the amount of data we're pulling in, is extremely intensive as well. Essentially, after that, we need to store this data somewhere, right? After we take it in and we process it and we filter it and we're trying to make this data clean, we have to store it. And so odds are Ehrlich here used Postgres. And Postgres is a open source relational database that really just performs well. Most of the enterprise applications that I worked on or helped manage product direction for, they all used Postgres of some form. So odds are he's using Postgres. And also, Postgres tends to be a little lower cost than a lot of others, but it also performs really well. So odds are you're using Postgres. So we have all this data, and we take the intensive scraper, the intensive processing from Hadoop, we have the data stored. Now we just have to show this data, right? How are our insights being shared? So we simply, odds are we're gonna have a simple dashboard that basically just shares our insights that we found we were generating based on the data we've collected. And that's really how I'd imagine MVP of Aviato would go. It was just simply sharing that data, sharing those insights, and helping airlines make better decisions. So that's really cool. And then the cherry on top is obviously you want this data to be refreshing all the time. There's a lot of different automation ways to do this. Odds are, based on the show's timing, they're going to use a cron job, probably running frequently because it's pulling in a crazy amount of data. They're just going to cron it and just pull in data at a standard interval, like every 15 minutes, every 20 minutes, every hour, every 4 hours. But either way, that interval is small enough where the data being ingested is manageable, but also large enough where they're not just kicking this off nonstop. Decisions like that is where you hire really smart engineers who can determine the best opportunities or the best frequency to pull some of these large pieces of data. Right? So, understanding the ins and outs of this product. Going off of that, how can we grow this product further? How do we capitalize on our purchase? How do we make it grow? How do we make it really valuable for us long term? And this is where it gets exciting. So, the first thing you need to do, understanding the depths of this product and where its weaknesses, where its faults are, because you can't really build a house on a weak foundation. You have to make sure that, and obviously code is the exact same, right? You need to make sure that whatever you're building upon is fundamentally sound, will perform well, will scale well, and will make sure you are doing everything that's right. So the first thing after this acquisition is to refactor a ton of this code. So the first thing would do is you would get away from the web scraping immediately. So you would convert a lot of these things to API calls, obviously negotiate rates with these social media companies to make these cleaner API calls. And obviously you're gonna be making a lot of them. So you need to make sure you have this in line, right? So after we're pulling in the data, knowing that as we're changing the data we're taking in, we also need to probably change how we're processing that data. So as we won't have the volume of data, it's going to be a much more refined piece of data. We could probably trim a lot of that excess processing out. I mean, we will have some, right? But we're not going to need as robust of a pipeline. And there's advantages here because one, simplicity is stability. And we see this everywhere in software engineering. The more overly complex products out there that are software pieces, more likely they're going to break down, right? If you're throwing, when we see random errors that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, odds are, they're doing something fancy or they're doing some kind of ridiculous trick. But if you keep it extremely simple and focused and you're like, I just want to take this clean data, I want to send it in, I want to sort it and send it, you reduce the amount of errors that you'll have. And so it's a very powerful tool to simply streamline a lot of this. Simple down the pipeline, simple down to the API calls. And then from there, after you refactor a lot of that code to make it a lot cleaner and a lot more stable of a solution, what you do is you expanded that out of what types of insights you have, right? So if I have Aviato, I want to have the ability to integrate with other pieces of business data that I have throughout my business, right? So if Timmy makes a positive Facebook post about Frontier Airlines in an airport, a couple things I want to know as an airline. One, where's Timmy flying? What flight is he on? Who's his flight crew? What kind of plane? What kind of plans does he have? Okay, so getting all those insights, what we can do here is I can take my Aviato data and let me cross-reference it in against a passenger list, right? Let me cross-reference that against my mileage program. Let me cross-reference that against where they're going, and let me make a good assumption whether they're traveling for business or pleasure, right? Basically, by taking all these insights, let's just say Frontier can then identify, my flights from Pi going to Houston have very positive reviews because my flight crew involves A, B, and C people, or because it flies in the morning, it's less turbulent, or the gate that we always fly out of has a Starbucks right next door. So for that first in the morning flight, passengers can get their coffee and get right on the plane, right? So by taking all these little insights, we can further develop the value that we can deliver to our customers, right? So maybe if I'm Frontier and I want to fly out of different gates and I want to fly out of the best gate, what I want to do, maybe I want to work out something with my airports and saying that I want to fly out all my planes, no matter what terminal they're at, but they have to be within a 2-minute walk of a Starbucks. That would be kind of cool, right? You'd have an increase in positive experiences with your flights, right? Because people would be caffeinated going out of their plane. They'd have their fresh brew to a fresh seat to have a fresh start in a new city, which is really exciting. So, again, that's one of the reasons why I do that. In theory, also, some people might be, their thought was let's expand, instead of going the internal data route. One thing some people might think of is, let's take this data and target other airlines to understand what other airlines are doing. And that's fine and dandy. I would just very, very, very cautiously talk against this. And there's several reasons why. One, if you think if I'm pulling the data, a lot of data from one airline, right? When I have a second airline that might have more people, they might have less people. But if I have a second airline, odds are I'm going to require double the data. And then if I go to a third or a fourth or a fifth, if I keep on expanding the amount of airlines I use, the amount of data that you're pulling in is a ton, right? You would explode your compute costs, you could explode your storage costs. And it might actually give you too much data for some individual person to really wrap their head around. And that's not what you want to do. With Aviato, as a user of Aviato, what you want to do here is you want to ensure that the data that you're presenting is actionable, and that you can take this data, break it down, and make better decisions for flyers, right? And so going off of pulling in that third-party data, again, too much data might not be a great thing. It might handicap you a little bit. But also, more importantly, external analysis doesn't give you a lot of internal action items. And a lot of companies do tend to get caught up in this, is when I see a company, let's just say, great example, like let's just say, this airline is providing free bags, right? So there's a couple of things there, and let's just say some companies might say, ooh, let's also do the same thing. Let's make bags free. Or, ooh, let's give free, let's give everyone a pillow as they walk in the plane. Other airlines might say like, oh, let's do that also, right? And if you're consistently in a pattern of doing this, biggest thing is, are you ever really leading? No, you're always just following your competition. So you'll always be second best. You'll always be a little late to the punch bowl. You'll never be able to deliver. You'll always be behind your competition. And that's not good business practice in general, right? In order to lead, the core of leading in business is to lead, is to be first, right? So if I am going to, in order to do that, to do something that my customers truly enjoy, I have to just understand my customers and deliver them something they enjoy. It's very simple. Like it's, a lot of times a lot of companies will get caught up in a lot of competitive analysis, but it's a lot of things that they can't control themselves. Historically, an example of somebody who's just following a competitor, Coca-Cola when they made New Coke, right? Pepsi was growing in market share at the time. And Coca-Cola thought, oh, maybe we need to follow and make a similar tasting drink to Pepsi because that's where our consumers are going. And New Coke today is considered to be one of the greatest product failures in history. And it's not because essentially they made those decisions on following the leader or following a competitor, not following the leader. They're just following a competitor, which is, again, that's how you get caught up. In order to really grow a product in general, you have to truly understand what your customers want, what they need you to do, and you need to deliver to that understanding, right? And that could be the biggest use case, the most mainstream one, or it could be a niche one. the small, obscure one. But you need to understand where you fit and what kind of customers you're trying to deliver for and how you best suit those customers. So again, back off that rant. That's again, emphasis on external data, gathering that external information is great, but don't get caught up on it. And then also based on the costs involved, it is probably not the decision you want to make, right? So going after that, we're expanding our internal insights with Aviato. We're making it a better product, a better tool for us, right? And going off of that, we, at Frontier, we spent a lot of money on an internal tool. Companies will do that. But companies that don't look beyond their own company when they do this, they're missing out on a major opportunity. And that is licensing this software on a B2B. Why would you do that? A couple things. One, you have a very distinct use case. Do you think it only applies to airlines? And so, as Frontier, am I competing with Etihad or Air France? No. I'm sorry, no offense to Frontier, but if you're flying business class on Etihad, you're not booking a connecting flight on Frontier. So there are other companies in this space that don't compete with you. Like, you're a budget carrier, you can, by licensing this software and integration suite out to other airlines internationally or outside of your category, that allows you to monetize and truly get a return on that investment. But also, going off of that, the core of this product is to understand direct consumer feelings within while traveling from point A to point B. So let's think about other things that do that, right? Other transportation modes. Why can't we license this out to Amtrak? Why can't we license this out to Greyhound? Why can't we license this out to any European train line? Like, why can't we do that, right? And we definitely could. So as we are taking distinct new opportunities with this Aviato software, applying it to different modes of transportation, different airlines in the category, we're making ourselves better, but also we're helping further distinguish our product, but also we're future-proofing our business, right? The airline industry in general, at least within the United States, is extremely unprofitable. And again, it's more about the profitability side. We see in the United States a lot of times, a lot of these airlines have merged together, not because they're profitability's sake, but it's because essentially they're saving each other from bankruptcy every time. By having a SaaS wing to Frontier Airlines, what you're doing is you're creating a very, very, very profitable cost center here. And what essentially, by growing it to other forms of transportation, what you're doing is you are creating an extremely profitable side of your company, and which will support the least or less profitable side, which will allow you to expand, whether you want to expand in the software engineering side or the SaaS side, or whether you want to expand in the flying side. However, over time, it may not be a bad opportunity to pivot away from that and to essentially taper away from flying long term. There are several historical examples of companies creating new business units to intentionally taper off of or get rid of the old one. The biggest example, probably one of the most famous examples of this, is the Dayton department store. They saw this huge movement of one-stop shopping at large, bigger box stores, and they wanted to create a company to be a part of that movement. So they create their business unit. They created Dayton department stores, made this business unit to eventually kill off the Dayton department store so they could thrive with this new brand. And that new brand today is Target. Target was created by the Dayton department store to cannibalize the Dayton department store and get them away from that traditional model. So going off of that, what we're going to conclude here is that as Frontier has acquired Aviato, as they acquired this product, as they've narrowed it down and refined it and made a really good product, expanded their ability to issue insights based on internal integrations and a few other tools, by then licensing this software out to to other airlines, to train lines, to bus lines, to anywhere that transports people. They are creating a new line of business that could and should become more profitable than they're flying, and could actually, and hopefully someday will, get them out of that flying industry and more of helping other airlines soar through better customer service insights. So again, that's my exciting take on this. Is granted, this was a fictional acquisition by Frontier, but if it was an actual acquisition, Frontier could have used it to really pivot and change how their company operates and make themselves into an extremely profitable SaaS company. With that being said, thanks for tuning in. My name is Tom Prime, and join us next time when we talk about the banana stand from Arrested Development. Thank you very much. Have a great one.